Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Let's Analyze the companion characters from Dragon Age the Veilguard. I am here joined by another eye candy guest. Please introduce yourself.
I'm the eye candy.
There we go.
So I'm Mikey. I've been on Hark's channel multiple times before. You can find me on the Dragon Age with the Dragon Age talks that Hark's done before. You can find me on the Mass Effect talks that Hark's done before. We did a one-on-one talk about Mass Effect Andromeda. We've done Mass Effect Revelations. So if you're looking for me on a tabletop that Hark has done before, you can find me there. As for where you can find me outside of that, you can find me on YouTube at The Long Play Gamer. You can find me on Twitch at Surely Only Mikey, and you can find me on Twitch at The Component Cast.
Great. I will have links to all of Mikey's stuff down below in the description, so please do check him out. Mikey, why don't you share with everybody who we're going to be talking about today and why you chose this person to talk about?
So we're talking about Taash. Taash is a Quinari female warrior who is associated with the Lords of Fortune. They are voiced by Jin Mali, and they appear in Dragon Age Vows and Vengeance, which is the podcast series that has not yet been released for her episode. You can also find them in the Veilguard, which is not yet released, but will release in the next month, which is wild. And they are written by Trick Weeks.
Jin Mali, by the way, has appeared in Star Trek Picard, NCIS, Silicon Valley, and The Young and the Restless. Why Tash specifically?
Tash seemed the most interesting because, like, we've had Quinari companions before. We had Sten, we had Iron Bull, but Tash seems like they don't have any connection to the Qun at all. Which is why I was like, oh, this person seems like they might be an entirely different look at what it's like being Quinari in the world of Thetis.
Yeah. That's I totally feel a very unique vibe from this one.
So Tash was raised in Rivain, which is a very interesting. I don't think we've actually ever been to Rivain before, but it's the same
No.
place Severin was from, I believe, right?
That's the same place who was from, I'm sorry?
Severin.
Zevran was from Antiva, but his another rogue companion in Dragon Age 2 was from Rivain. Do you remember? Isabella. Isabella is Rivaini. Yes.
So it's going to be very interesting because Isabella is, a pirate queen. She's very seductive. She's got this like way about her that's very like, if I don't get what I want, I'll just take it anyway.
Yeah.
But then there's Tash, who is, from what we've seen and heard, nothing like that at all.
Yeah. Yes.
Tash is very, according to what I've read, she's quite thrill-seeking, which matches with Isabel. But she's headstrong. She's blunt. And she wields dual axes, which is very much not.
Yeah. Has a dual axes. I feel has a very barbarian feel. To it.
Feels like you've multi-class barbarian fighter and just went, I'm gonna hit things as hard as I can.
Yeah.
But you know what? That's fair. It's allowed.
Since you mentioned Isabella, there are theories on whether or not Isabella is going to make an appearance in this game, specifically because of the Lords of Fortune. Some people are thinking maybe she's actually now a part of the Lords of Fortune, which I think would be very on brand for her. Which then, sort of tangentially related, I'm curious if you do meet Isabella or any other character that's from Dragon Age 2, some people, for example, were wondering if Fenris was going to make an appearance in this game. I hope that there is a mention of Hawk, especially if Hawk did not survive Dragon Age Inquisition.
Yes.
And especially if Hawk did not survive and they also romanced them.
Yes.
So yeah, I feel like that's something that would be a missed opportunity if that wasn't addressed.
Your Hawk romance Meryl, and you have an affiliation with the Veil Jumpers. And
that's right, Meryl again. Jumpers. Yeah.
It'd be very weird because Varric mentions it specifically at the end of that mission. If you leave Hawk behind, he mentions the romance character that Hawk has had.
Yes.
But he has to go tell them, and I'm like, oh.
Oh yes. Yeah. So that would be very cool, which makes me hopefully very optimistic about seeing some more Dragon Age 2 characters, because I think that would be That would be fantastic. But going back, didn't mean to go on too far of a tangent. Going back to Taash again. Go ahead, Mikey.
So Tash is something that has a very deep knowledge. Now, my assumption is that the knowledge is about, her mercenary work with the Lords of Fortune, maybe with the dungeon delving. Maybe she knows a lot about monsters. Maybe she's got a lot of info. Maybe she's an underrated strategist. Maybe she's maybe she knows a bit more about strategy than she leads on because she likes to not get too wrapped up in it. But in my mind, maybe she knows a bit more about that sort of thing than she likes to let on because it makes them come across a little bit less, I suppose, as a target. It's like, oh, Tash, they're the big person with the two axes. No one thinks twice about them. But then they use, the intelligence they have secretly hidden behind their physique as, a secret weapon.
I'm glad you mentioned that because if you look at the trivia section in her wiki page, one of the things that they say is she is described as a gym bro and a jock, which, as a stereotype, you don't always associate with having intelligence necessarily. Again, very big stereotype. So I think I'm curious, as you said, if there's more to her than just that. The other part about her personality in the trivia section was if BioWare polled the Dragon Age game developers with the question, if our companions worked at the studio, what would their jobs be? And they said testing. And Taash would send all the bugs right back at us with a grin. If Taash worked in IT, you try to get your things working before asking for help. And then Taash could appreciate the bombastic yet subtle nature of audio. Okay. All right.
I could see Tash being an audiophile. I could see Tash secretly having like a record player in their part of the rookery.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm sure she's going to be very three-dimensional. Mm-hmm. There's one more trivia point here that says she has an interest in sparkling treasures and hitting things with an axe, which again doesn't sound like the most intellectual part of her, but there's a lot of things I'm curious about her, especially in her design. For example, she does have what appears to be a prosthetic horn, emerald or jade. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's white, I think.
Is it? I think one of them is at least green, I believe.
I shared some artwork actually in your server the other day.
Yeah, her tarot card has her with her green. I'm not sure if it's emerald or jade horn. So
yeah, it does look a bit more green in that.
Yeah, so I don't know if she purposely cut off her horn so that she could, attach a trophy of some sort, or if it happened after the fact, if her horn got broken off non-purposefully, and then she ended up finding a suitable replacement for it.
I mean, there's very much a case of, maybe it's a dragon's horn that she's attached to herself. She's a dragon hunter. That's her.
Yeah.
She's a hunter of dragons, and maybe the dragon took the horn, and she went, "Well, I've killed you now, and I will take yours as a replacement."
Yeah.
And then she shaped it to fit the design of her own horns.
Yeah.
I could very much see them doing it. That comes across as something that I'd imagine them doing when they're like, "You've taken something from me, and now I'm taking something back."
Yeah. Speaking of her being a dragon hunter, she can breathe fire. We learned that too.
That's interesting.
It's very interesting. I don't think we've met another Kunari who had that innate ability, so I don't know if this is something unique to her specifically, or if there is a lineage of Kunari that's just what they do.
I mean, it could always be the classic. She takes a sip of absinthe and spits it out and sets it on fire with a spark. Cause
it could be that. But then again, if you remember from conversations with the Iron Bull back in Dragon Age Inquisition, there was, of course, a lot of implications of possible dragon lineage within the Kunari race, which I'm assuming is going to be revisited in this game.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be interesting if Tash was like, "Yeah, one of my ancestors is like a dragon,
Yeah.
and you know, it'd be interesting if that was an actual fact that they figured out over the
Mm-hmm.
years, maybe. I don't know, or because like they are also the youngest companion of the set.
Are they the
Yes, they
youngest?
are in their
Ah,
mid-20s compared to everyone else who's a
yeah.
bit older than that. So they are supposed to be the youngest of the companions.
Interesting.
So,
I did not know that. That's a cool piece of trivia.
mm.
Uh, which is impressive because she seems to be very experienced,
Yes, that was the
despite her
thing
age.
that I did think about. Is that Tash comes across as, if you've ever played any like JRPG or any RPG before, wherein you meet a character who is older than your characters, or maybe has been doing the same thing for longer. They tend to be a higher level, and then you like rely on them a lot. Like Tash reminds me of, if you've ever played at Skies of Arcadia. There's a character in it called Drachma who you meet at some point, and he is like 10 or 15 levels higher than your characters that you meet that you're currently running at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And you rely very heavily on him because he's so much more powerful than your characters at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And Tash comes across as someone who, if you met them in a JRPG, they'd be like 15 levels higher than you, even though they're younger than your character, because
Mm-hmm.
of the fact they've been doing dragon hunting for so long.
Yeah. Yeah. Wondering then if there's any ties, any mention of the Iron Bull, obviously.
Mm,
Um, because the Iron Bull also has had experience, I believe, hunting dragons or knowledge about hunting dragons
yeah.
when you first start talking to him,
Mm,
which I think is great. Um, Talking more about her faction, the Lords of
yes.
Fortune, I just wanted to mention that the Lords of Fortune is referenced not once, not twice, but three times in the Dragon Age Tevinter Nights novel.
Mm,
Um, they are mentioned in the story Luck in the Gardens, which actually references Dorian Pavis.
mm,
They are referenced in Genitivi Dies in the End, which is featuring Brother Genitivi, for those of you who remember, especially from the Sacred Ashes
mm,
mission back in Dragon Age Origins. And then the last story references from Harold Had the Plan, which I'm not going to get into, but for sure, for those of you who have the ability to acquire the Dragon Age Adventure Nights, in general, it's got a lot of great stories,
mm.
and many of the companions for Dragon Age: The Veilguard appears in that book too. So I think it's definitely worth picking up if you have the opportunity. Um,
If you can
but
get the audiobook instead, if you want to listen to it while you're on your way to and from work, it's always an option.
yeah, yep, absolutely. Um, and we already talked about how within the Lords of Fortune, people wonder if Isabella's involved. Uh, I'm I'm a little bit curious about what sort of missions are going to be involved with Tash, especially if it's tied to the Lords of Fortune.
Mm.
I assume we're going to go to Ravane, like you mentioned, and possibly meeting the. I don't know if we're going to end up in the HQ of the Lord of Fortune or if you're going to meet like specific members of the Lords of Fortune. Those are the type of things that I definitely want to explore.
Mhm.
Because I think just taking a side quest where you're actually going on a very classic dungeon delve,
Yeah,
looking for some treasure, would be a lot of fun. Presumably to help something in the main storyline
mhm.
for the Veilguard.
Yeah, like Tash is like, I've always heard of this dragon hunting weapon that had been like lost to time because obviously
Yeah.
before Inquisition, dragons had not been really heard of for a long time and they weren't as prevalent, and now they're more prevalent again.
Hmm.
So Tash is like, oh, I heard that there was this axe that had been enchanted or this thing that had been enchanted years and years, hundreds of years ago to hunt dragons, and I've been looking for it ever since I joined the Lords of Fortune.
Yeah.
And then it turns out, oh, the Lords of Fortune have found it, but now we got to go into this giant dungeon to find it. A
Yeah.
bit like maybe like a Deep Roads excavation kind of situation where you gotta like find the money to fund it and then go to this place and find this weapon. and that would be like Tash's. That would be like the capstone of Tash's like arc, I guess, for like her own personal story. Like I finally found this thing that I've set my life out to find, and now I can, focus entirely on this mission that I'm here with the rookery. I think that would be kind of cool.
I think the other unique thing about having Tash in your party is not only is she a Qunari, but she is a female Qunari. And if you remember back from Dragon Age Origins, the way that Sten describes the differences between men and women within his clan, it's very different, I think, about than how Iron Bull, for example, experienced men and women. And so I would love to hear more about that directly from Tasha's perspective.
I mean, I think a lot of that will be a case of like we think Tash didn't grow up in the Qun because they were born in Ravane.
That's true. Yes, that's true. Yes. That's very true.
If Tash wasn't born in the Qun, then their opinions of the Qun would be very like external, looking in. Yeah. And they might have experienced this thing of like, there are people who were maybe raised in Sten's clan and people who were maybe raised in the Iron Bull's clan, and they've met various people across that spectrum, and they've gone, I'm not too interested in following that line of thinking. I vastly prefer being a Talvashoth. I'm happy enough not being involved in that.
Yeah. I also think what's interesting is some people had speculations, which I don't know if it's been confirmed or denied by this point, but people were speculating about Tash's gender identity and whether or not their pronouns are actually they, them. And I don't know if you have any insight or any...
Some, because throughout some of the articles that have been released and Tash has been mentioned in them, a lot of the time they have been talked about in the they, them. So... Interesting. It's possible. It's very likely. There's been no confirmation yet. On that, but a lot of the time when there's an article involving Tash, for example, there's an article here describing Tash's arc, and they always use the phrase their arc or them, not
interesting.
So
in the wiki they use she her pronouns, but that's that's a wiki, which take it with a grain of salt. So I think that'll be very interesting if that actually turns out to be true, how they're going to address or explore that.
I mean, I'm looking at the article here involving that arc mention, which I think is quite cool because Bush mentions that Tash's arc throughout the story is supposed to be them finding where they belong in the world, their boundaries, what do they fight for, and how do they become at peace with who they are. Because it's pretty
explicit.
It's pretty explicit of like they have this. They don't belong in the world that they were born into, because it's likely they were born, in Ravane by two Talvashoth, or maybe they were born in Ravane and then their parents died and they were adopted by some people in Ravane, or there's a whole load of different reasons why they might not be born in the Qun. But it seems like they look at this and go, who am I? What am I doing here? And how do I go forward in life and find happiness that isn't just me hitting things with axe?
Yeah. Speaking of her relationship with other companions, I think there's already been mentioned that if you do not romance Tash or Harding, I believe,
correct.
Then Harding and Tash may end up forming into a relationship with each other, which I'm without knowing enough about her personality specifically, I am excited to hopefully watch that play out. What I guess I don't want to have happen, I don't want it to just be this like out of nowhere, oh my gosh, they're now kissing in the corner now. I kind of want to see a little bit of flirting between the two of them, maybe. And and certainly this can happen a little bit later in the game once the rook has had a chance to go after them first, right?
Yeah.
But perhaps there's a little bit of back and forth because you get that a bit actually with Dorian and the Iron Bull in Dragon Age Inquisition. So I hope that it's a very cute, I guess progression. I suppose over time, or maybe not cute. Maybe like
it's just rough and tumble.
Maybe maybe Harding actually is a lot more aggressive.
I want to climb that tree.
Yeah. Maybe, who knows? Yeah. You're like Harding,
you're spicy.
They don't call her Harding for nothing, apparently. So
Harding in every town, it seems.
Harding in every town.
Yeah.
Harding in every town.
There's also a thing here about, speaking of romances.
Yes.
Taash's. This person who did this interview was asked what the steamiest romance is in the game, and they speak for themselves personally, but at the culmination of the romance arcs, they'd have to say Taash.
Is the steamiest?
And I saw the cinematic, I was hollering.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I remember Iron Bull's romance.
That's so funny.
And I was hollering during the scene when Cassandra and Cullen like enter the room.
Yes.
So
Cassandra, Cullen, and is it Liliana? No, sorry, Josephine. Josephine comes in.
Josephine comes in as well. Yes, Liliana would have been like whatever. Liliana would have been.
I've seen bigger.
Liliana would be like, oh, is it Thursday again? Sorry, I forgot. I meant to join in.
Damn.
I meant to join. Doggone it. Well, we'll try it again next week, fellas.
I guess I missed the memo, you know. But I do remember it being very funny because Cullen made a very funny joke, or like Cullen laughs at some joke that I think Josephine makes, and it's very, very funny. Yes. But what I'm expecting is that this is going to be like, if you've ever played Andromeda and romanced Korra, that's very steamy because there's like a full-on animated scene going on there, and I assume it'll be similar in this now that they've pushed that envelope and they're like, okay, we're happy to have this sort of stuff in our games. So it'll be very interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing all the romances, and if people are saying, Taash is the steamiest, then we'll be seeing what that's like in the not-too-distant future.
One thing also, since we're on this topic, that I thought would be interesting, and I don't know if this is done in, say, Baldur's Gate 3, is if in the past there's typically like one specific let's get sexy times going, cinematic. And I thought what would be cool is if they actually had more than one. Like one would be, and what I guess what I'm trying to say is maybe your initial encounter with Taash would be like hot and heavy and steamy and very like as nature intended kind of thing. But then maybe towards the end game you have another sexual encounter, but it's a lot more like sensual and a lot more I don't know, emotional. Which I think would be a very cool I guess not twist, that's not the right word.
It's like progression in the relationship.
Right.
Like,
progression in
being Taash might maybe think when you're initially with them that it's like, oh, it's a sex thing, and then you stay with them and they go, oh, this person actually likes me and I actually like them. And
right, exactly, because I was thinking when we were talking about Balara, we suspected Balara is probably at the opposite end of that spectrum where she's very inexperienced. And so it would be cool if, of course, the initial one was the very cute, oh no, I've never done this before kind of thing. But then the second one is like, push me up against the wall, Rook. It's like that would be kind of hilarious. He's like,
like Balara goes from being super innocent and super calm to being like, I want you to do nasty things to me, and I'm like, all right, you know what, Balara? Fair enough. If that's what you want.
Right. I sort of attribute that, for those of you who played Final Fantasy X, the shift from Yuna in Final Fantasy X, I'm not really sure what I'm doing, to like Final Fantasy X to I'm shooting guns at you into your face. like that's the kind of shift I'd love to see.
Yes.
So yeah.
I could see that with Balara. I could see that because like there's a lot of people out there who I know who, when they have their initial encounter with someone who they like, it's very like timid and quite like, oh, I don't know what do my hands do? And then it's a case of once you've done it a few times, or maybe you've done it once or twice, it's like, okay, now I'm comfortable and I'm confident and I understand how things work, and I understand that this person thinks I'm attractive, and I'm, it's not as difficult after that. And I think Bolaro will be very much in that sort of thing. But back to Taash, I think Taash is decidedly the opposite of that.
Yeah.
Because of Tash's attitude and their experience in life. I think that they've gotten a lot of times where they go, yeah, I'm here and I'm large and I'm in charge and I'm looking to have a good time. And I entirely expect them to take a lot of leads in romances and in stuff like that. And if Harding is the way you think she is, and she's going to be like, I want to ride that tree, I think that'll be a bit of a shock for Taash. But I do think you're right in that I don't want to see what we saw in Mass Effect 3, where Garrus and Tali got together and no one saw it coming.
Right.
No one saw it coming. No, everyone was like, "What? What?" It's the same. People were less annoyed about James Vega and Ashley getting together in Citadel, because it was like, oh, two meatheads in the same building. Yeah, it's gonna happen.
Yeah, you had a few drinks,
Yeah. Whatever, it happens. But I entirely expect the outside of Rook's romances to be much more well progressed and well built around the characters. So we'll see stuff like Taash being maybe surprisingly romantic with Harding, or maybe Harding being surprisingly forward with Taash. We'll see a little bit of everything from everybody, I think.
To be fair, though, I did feel like the surprise of Garrus and Tali was for a good effect, because it was sort of like a, oh wow, of like, oh wow, because it's like you get that initial and you're like, so I think that worked, but I think for something like Dragon Age, I'd agree that I would kind of prefer the progression that we talked about.
Absolutely. So, and I think we'll see it, which is going to make everyone very happy. I think everyone will be walking around the rookery listening to all the side conversations, like is someone flirting.
Oh yeah,
flirting with Taash.
My rook is going to be so nosy, so up on everyone's business. He's like, give me
rook.
I love my tea. It's like I like coffee, don't get me wrong, but I want my tea, my daily dose of tea.
Spill the tea.
Spill that tea, please. I want to get all up on everyone's business. So
I can very much imagine your Let's Play going on for an extra 10 episodes, because you're just walking around the rookery quietly, sneaking on people, being like, I want to listen to this.
Yes.
Find Rook and Harding in a corner somewhere, and you're like, am I going to need to take the sensor nug out of the closet for this one?
Who do you think Taash will have friction with companion-wise? Who do you think they would not get along very well with?
Honestly, I think Neve.
Well, okay. What do you think that?
Neve.
What do you think that?
Because Neve is very confident and very forward-facing and very I'm here to get shit done, and Taash seems very similar to that. So I think they will initially clash, because they're almost too similar. The same ends of a magnet. You can't quite push them together.
Yeah.
But I do think they'll get along eventually.
Yeah. How about Belara and Taash? I'm curious about how you think they would get along.
I think Taash might see Belara as a little sister.
Really? Okay.
Because there's this bright-eyed and wild person jumping through all of these Illuvians looking for exploration and magic, and Taash kind of sees themselves in Belara when they were young, and doing all the stuff with the Lords of Fortune back when they were younger, and they had this whole bright-eyed and magnanimous look at the world. And now there's this other person who is like that, and I think it might be a case of Taash might look at them and go, I must protect the small child.
Yeah. I can see that.
When it comes to who I think Taash will enjoy working with the most, I think it might actually be Davrin.
Why is that?
Because Davrin has what I would like to call he might be the most flexible companion, even though he's a fighter as well. I think he has certain things about his skill sets, and he's very uniquely placed in the Dragon Age lore as possibly one of the first Grey Wardens in recent history to have a griffin.
Mm.
Tash might look at that and go, "Oh, this is interesting," and they want to work with them because they want to be like, "So the Griffin, so Assen, how did you manage to convince them to work with you?" And it's like, Davern is like, "Oh, it's a symbiotic thing. We work together. We're friends. We have a bond." And I think that Davern and Tash will bond over the fact that Tash has never really probably been able to find that sort of thing in the wild. Like they do a lot of their work on their own. So I think that they might find Davern almost intriguing as a person to be like, oh, how did Davern end up like this? Davern is charismatic and magnanimous and has this like aura about him. He seems like he could lead people, and I think the fact that Tash sees that in this person who also has a Griffin companion who they have bonded with. Tash doesn't come across as the kind of person who has had friends in the Lords of Fortune. They have co-workers,
Okay.
not
Okay.
necessarily friends.
Mm.
And I think Davern will be very intriguing to them because of the fact that Davern doesn't just have co-workers; he has friends who work with him.
How about Emmerich? I'm trying to figure out if those two have anything in common. Because it's one of with Emmerich, I feel like they'd be neutral. I can't think of anything that would rub each other the wrong way. But I also don't see a common thread between the two, unless you can think of something.
Well, Tash is the youngest companion, and Emmerich's the oldest.
Right. That's yes.
So the only thing I could see there is maybe Emmerich initially seeing Tash as like, a youngin, like someone who maybe he needs to try to implant some wisdom and some guidance in, and how receptive Tash will be of that.
Right.
Oh,
I don't know.
I don't
Right.
think Tash. I think it'll depend on like how Emmerich approaches the advice. If he's trying to give them advice, because Tash obviously has a lot of life experience for someone who's so young. But I think Emmerich might have more experience in different ways. Like Emmerich has the life lived as a high class gentleman who's had to deal with probably politicking and people all his life. While Tash is like, I've lived, on the edge. I've never had to have too much of a relationship with people, and I think Emmerich might see that as like someone who maybe he can give a bit of mentoring to.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Good points. Given what you are suspecting of Tasha's personality, do you think that she has a chip on her shoulder? Do you think that she has certain biases against specific types of people? Or do you not really see that from her at all? Or
I
them, excuse me.
I think Tash has what I would like to refer to as a um, don't ask me anything and I won't tell you any lies kind of personality.
Mm.
They understand that people have secrets and things they don't want to tell people and things that they aren't proud of because they've probably
Mm.
done things they're not proud of and things they
Mm.
keep secret because they worked for the Lords of Fortune. They still do. They've probably had to hurt people or do things that they aren't proud of in their time there. So I think Tash would, if Tash was judging people for, let's say, stealing, I'd find
Mm-hmm.
that very hypocritical,
Mm.
given who
Mm-hmm.
they work for.
Yeah.
So I think that they probably won't judge anyone too harshly on the choices that they make to get to where they are, unless
Mm-hmm.
obviously they're doing things because they're evil or they're like, oh, I like hurting people. I think Tash would be like, yeah, you're a bad person because that's the universal sort of law. Is like if
Mm-hmm.
you're hurting people for the sake of doing it, you're probably not a good person. Um, but I don't think they will look at the general populace and go, "Oh, I don't like this particular sect of people for whatever reason."
Mm-hmm.
They don't come across as that kind of person. I don't think they have.
Yeah.
I don't think they have it um, in their mind state to actively judge someone else for the decisions that they made when they know full well that they could have made decisions that have led them there too.
Right. 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 Going back just for a moment again to uh, romancing Tash,
Hmm.
what do you theorize could be the relationship conflict that you will most likely ultimately have? Because I think every single relationship has something
Yeah,
that you kind of have to work through. It's not bunnies and ponies the whole time.
I mean, yeah,
So,
yeah.
what do you think that might be
I
for
think in Tasha's
Tash?
case, it might actually be the fact that I don't think they have much self worth.
Hmm.
I think that they don't view
Okay.
themselves as a super high value person. I think
Hmm.
they have a confidence in themselves, in their abilities and in their talents and in their experience. But I don't think they themselves have this like I'm important
Really?
thing
Huh.
about them. I think when it
Interesting.
comes to like interpersonal relationships, I don't think they think that. Now maybe when it comes to like
Interesting.
combat and fighting and all that, they're like I'm important
Yeah.
because I'm good at this. I know what I'm doing here. But when it comes to like a long term relationship, I don't think Tash comes across as someone who's had one. Like I don't think
Hmm.
they would have been able to have one, and then maybe if they had, it didn't end well, or there's like a
They Yeah, I would see them as having sexual encounters for sure.
yes, yeah,
But for them to be meaningful,
yeah.
I don't know.
So like I think that they might come across as like they sort of somewhat like Vetra. Vetra sort of struggled to be like Vetra struggled to be like I want to be with you, and I understand you like me, and I understand
Yeah.
that you're willing to put up with me, but I don't feel like I deserve you
Yeah.
because of their own upbringing and their mental state.
Which makes perfect sense if she and Harding get together.
Yes.
Because I do feel like knowing Harding's personality, there you can kind of tell a lot about who people end up with
Mhm.
romantically based on, what kind of things are they getting from this other person.
Yes.
Obviously not for like a selfish reason, but just,
Mhm.
this
Personal
person
sort of fulfillment.
provides something for you
Yes.
that makes you happy or that makes you a better person or
Mhm.
whatever it is that gives you fulfillment in a romantic
Complements your
relationship.
weaknesses or allows you to improve upon yourself.
Right. And so if you look at Harding, I'm like, okay, yeah, like a lot of what you're saying makes total sense with her um, becoming a couple with Harding, with them becoming a couple with Harding. Yes.
I
So
could also
okay.
be entirely wrong, and if I
Yeah.
am, that's fair, I guess. But like that's my own sort of
Yeah. Yeah.
theory
Yeah.
because I see Tash and I
It,
think someone who is very confident in
yeah.
their life and in their professional settings, but I don't necessarily know if they understand how to be vulnerable.
Right. It's always fascinating to me whenever I have these characters that are just seem so together and they just
Mm.
seem so confident and stable and have a very good sense of self-worth seemingly,
Mm.
but then when you start to peel the layers back you realize the insecurity, and I'm like, yeah, like I'm a sucker for those kind of things.
Me too, if you believe it. I think Tash might have the second most interesting design of all the characters, with Emmerich and Manfred being number one. Because she's so striking. They're just so unique to look at, and that's the same with all Quinari. To be fair, like Quinari
Yeah.
as a species are so unique and so different than anything else that's on Thetis. Because you got humans, you got elves, you got dwarves, and then you
Yeah.
got the 7 foot tall Quinari as standard. Like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, cool. Um, so like I think that that's something that's really interesting about her is that they get the second most interesting design. And if it wasn't for the fact that Emmerich has a emerald-eyed assistant, I think she
Yeah.
would be number one.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do think that's a fair point to note. I think that there's been a very loving amount of detail and attention put into their design.
Yeah.
So I do love that. I do love that all the characters have a very unique design, but I think she's up there with
Yeah.
Emmerich as number one or two.
Yeah. It makes sense since they are wearing probably a lot of the trophies, I guess,
Yeah,
of their Lords of Fortune dungeon delving.
surprisingly gold out. She's got a lot of gold on her. You know, she's wearing a lot of bling, which I think is very like it's very cool because like I wouldn't
Yeah.
imagine like if I don't think we've seen the casual outfits that our companions wear yet, but I don't think Tash would wear a lot of gold casually.
Yeah. Yeah. Possibly jewelry, but
They do
yeah,
have ear
no.
piercings, so I assume they don't come out because I know that if you take those out for too long, they seal up. But like I'd imagine maybe they like take out
Yeah.
a lot of the necklaces and the rings and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, like I agree with you. The I One thing I am very uh uh interested in is the fashion of the companions, and seeing their casual wear is for me, a very, very cool piece of aesthetic, especially because I don't think they had casual wear as much in Inquisition.
The casual wear in Inquisition was like their starting armor set.
Okay, yeah, because with your Inquisitor, you for sure had casual.
Yes. You could wear like armor, or you could wear like a suit sort of thing.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. So being able to see your companions in that in an outfit that outside of battle armor, basically,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think helps show their personality and their tastes a little bit more.
I mean, you
For
don't
sure.
really see that in Mass Effect. Like, there's very few characters
Yeah.
in Mass Effect who you see in a casual outfit.
Correct.
Even when you romance
Yeah.
them, you know, you might see them
Correct.
in something that's like a uniform. Like, Jack doesn't wear anything else other than her,
Yeah.
leather jacket, which she looks great in. But,
Yeah,
not
yeah.
here to judge. Garrus puts on his suit, but, like, it's a suit, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I think that'll be the most interesting change, I think, with her.
Mhm.
They'll go from, like, blinged out in armor, carrying axes to PJs.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I know that in Andromeda we had the movie night.
Yes.
So in Inquisition we had poker, or not poker night. It was Wicked's Grace or whatever.
Grace, yeah.
Wicked Grace. We had Wicked Grace night. So I would love for Veilguard to have like a slumber party, or I don't know what it would be, but
I mean, it'd be cool if you could bring your companion out on dinner dates, like your romance partner. You could bring them out on dinner dates.
I would.
Events.
This is, you know what? I severely doubt that this is going to be a thing. But given how rich the different areas are that we're going to be visiting in this game, like there's Tevinter, there's Ravain, there's Antiva. It'd be cool if you could have a scene where you choose you go on a date, but you can choose which location and venue you could go to. You want some Antivan's Spanish-esque food, go here. You want whatever, and then the scene in the date plays out. I think that would be a really cool, nice to have in terms of the romance. And if any modders are out there listening, like, I would be your best friend if you mod the snot out of that, if it's not a thing in Dragon Age where you can to take them on a custom date.
Yeah,
to
that's
one
what
of
I do wish that the Mass Effect games had, was more like outside of story points with your romanceable companions. But yes, that's a different conversation for.
That's a totally different conversation.
But yeah, that's everything I think I have about Taash.
Mikey, we're gonna have to figure out some sort of BioWare like dating app, basically. A dating sim, specifically. BioWare dating sim.
If they released that, they'd make so much money.
They would make a lot of money.
Yeah, if there was just like a visual novel BioWare game where like you play just a random office worker who was just writing people in their offices and they were all different people, I'd buy that game tomorrow.
Dragon Age, Mass Effect, Jade Empire.
Yep.
Throw those in there. I would be very happy. Anyway, thank you so much, Mikey, for hanging out with me. Super fun talk as always. Again, check Mikey out in the links below. And yeah, I appreciate you all watching. Tune in to the next episode of Let's Analyze the Companions of Dragon Age the Veilguard. Until then, everyone, love yourselves and love each other.